So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've got more than 24 clips on a bunch of different topics for which will be a great show tonight, I think. This is my weekly broadcast of the best clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the corporate media here in the United States, along with a little political comedy and my commentary between the clips. And as always, I'll be using clips from the Sunday morning news shows on the regular big five outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, and I'll also use some quasi-news clips from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher and from last night's Saturday Night Live on NBC. Topics I'll be talking about include, marijuana, NSA spying, immigration, Bill O'Reilly's Super Bowl interview of President Obama today, and even Bridgegate from New Jersey. But first, I wanted to start with reaction to President Obama's State of the Union address from last Tuesday, and first from Seth Meyers on last night's Saturday Night Live, appearing for his final time on Weekend Update before he moves to hosting Late Night, after he served as head writer at Saturday Night Live for almost a decade. And he began Weekend Update by pointing out one of the more memorable moments from President Obama's State of the Union speech that you can see here.
This week, President Obama delivered the State of the Union address while Joe Biden just delivered.
And yeah, I think that's true that Vice President Joe Biden smirks in the background were some of the more interesting parts of the speech. And that's why I'm not really a big fan of the State of the Union speech, whether it's President Obama or any president. Because as political speeches go, they're pretty boring. They're like laundry lists a lot of the time. But Bill Maher over on HBO's Real Time last Friday explained why he actually loves the State of the Union speeches, or this State of the Union speech, over in this clip.
Now, did you watch the State of the Union? I love the State of the Union. I especially love the bullshit, because there's so much of it in there. My favorite part was when Obama, at one point, introduced to the nation the owner of a pizza shop and his employee who makes the dough. Why? Because he gave the employee, this kid, a raise. And, you know, we have scoured the nation to find uplifting stories, and this is what we came up with. A dough jockey now makes $10.75 an hour, and because of that, he can now go on a date to the movies and get a hand job in the car. USA, USA, USA! Oh, my God. Oh, the bullshit. What?
So I guess Bill Maher's characterization of Obama's speech there as not tackling the big issues is one of the big criticisms his speech got, and I'll show President Obama's chief of staff addressing that criticism in a few minutes. But first, I wanted to show how Bill Maher also found some Republican behavior at the State of the Union speech to make fun of, talking about the Republican congressman who brought someone from the controversial reality show Duck Dynasty as his guest to the speech, for the reasons that Bill Maher explained in his monologue in this clip.
No, it was Republican Congressman from Louisiana, Vance McAllister, and he brought the Duck Dynasty guy, and they asked him why. I swear to God, he said, quote, I wanted to bring some diversity to our nation's capital. Yes, affirmative action for rednecks. This is what this nation needs. When will white people get a seat at the table in this country?
Now, Bill Maher might be making fun of Republican diversity there, but over on NBC's Meet the Press, Republican Senator Tim Scott was a guest, and he's one of only 2 African Americans currently serving in the U.S. Senate, the other being the Democrat from New Jersey, Cory Booker. And Senator Scott actually talked about a different kind of Republican diversity when NBC's Meet the Press host David Gregory asked him about the pretty fractured Republican response to Obama's State of the Union over in this clip.
It should really be a party of ideas. And here you had the President's State of the Union and 4 different responses from the Republicans about the State of the Union. Is that division or is that unity on the Republican side?
Well, David, so often people look at the Republican Party and say that we're a monolith party that we don't have multiple voices with different perspectives on the issue. The fact of the matter is what you saw after the State of the Union is that there are many people in our party that are able to voice their concerns. The reason why the party continues to grow is because we like disparity, we like the diversity of ideas, and when we have that diversity of ideas, it helps us to build the best party for the future. And certainly I'm a part of the conservative aspect of the part of the party, and we have found very great success by partnering with folks who make our party better. So at the end of the day, what America needs is a party that is as diverse as the Republican Party. That is why the great opportunities for our future comes out of the GOP.
Now, I don't think what's going to grow the Republican Party is the diversity in opinion between the corporate establishment right and the radical Tea Party right, but I guess problems with the Republicans weren't really what was front and center in the news at the State of the Union speech, because that's President Obama's speech, and he got a couple of big criticisms. First, from those who said, like I showed in that Bill Maher monologue clip, that President Obama's agenda just seemed small. And over on Meet the Press, David Gregory got to ask President Obama's chief of staff, Dennis McDonough, about the criticism, and you can see his response over in this clip.
I'll tell you, if you think about the things that he laid out on the table this week, $10.10 an hour minimum wage, that's not going to be small for the hundreds of thousands of people who benefit from that. When you think about long-term unemployment, the president bringing in 300 of the country's biggest employers to say to them, hey, let's resolve this issue that's really dogging our economy. And when those guys get a fair shot at a job, and in fact a new job at some point, that's not going to be small to them. Later this week, you'll hear the president talk about Connect Ed. This is an opportunity where several private American companies are going to commit over $500 million to ensure that our schools across the country have the kind of technology so that our kids can compete in this economy. This builds on a story in the Times today. FCC says it's going to wire 15,000 schools, get 20 million kids online in the kind of learning, not the way you and I grew up, David, which is you had a computer science lab where you went to once a day. They sit at their tables all day with laptops, with tablets. That's the kind of education we want our kids to have.
Any of these initiatives.
So there you see the defense from the president's chief of staff, Dennis McDonough, as to why this isn't a small agenda. And I don't know, I guess I YouTube, you decide. Is that a small agenda or is that not a small agenda? You can post your comments in the comment section. Maybe I'll be able to get to some live comments and get a little discussion going at the end. But I want to show one of the other criticisms that Republicans made of President Obama's State of the Union speech was that he said if Congress doesn't act on these important issues, he'll do what he can through executive orders. And some people even called it that he's doing an imperial presidency, although he's actually done fewer executive orders than most of the presidents before him. But George Stephanopoulos asked Representative Paul Ryan, who was, of course, the vice presidential candidate against Obama in the last election, maybe a presidential candidate in 2016, and he asked him about this whole imperial presidency executive order question, and specifically asked him about how that can be true when President Obama has issued fewer executive orders than previous presidents, and here's the answer in this clip.
It's not the number of executive orders, it's the scope of the executive orders. It's the fact that he's actually contradicting law, like in the healthcare case, or proposing new laws without going through Congress, George. That's the issue.
So you think
this
he's
is our big
violating the
concern. We have an
Constitution?
increasingly lawless presidency. We have an increasingly lawless presidency where he is actually doing the job of Congress, writing new policies and new laws without going through Congress. Presidents don't write laws, Congress does. And when he does things like he did in healthcare, delaying mandates that the law said was supposed to occur when they were supposed to occur, that's not his job. The job of Congress is to change laws if he doesn't like them, not the presidency.
Well,
so executive orders are one thing, but executive orders that actually change the statute, that's totally different.
But if you
Now, I'm not sure what President Obama is doing is outside the scope of what executive orders have done in the past, and I actually have a clip of President Obama himself responding to this charge in an interview he did with CNN's Jake Tapper that played on the CNN program I always take clips from on Sunday mornings, CNN State of the Union, which is a little confusing because President Obama just gave his State of the Union address, but here's Jake Tapper, who got the first post-State of the Union interview with President Obama, which appeared on CNN State of the Union with Candy Crowley. And you can see President Obama's response to the whole imperial presidency overextension of executive order question in this clip.
Because and Senate Republicans, because there has been a large contingency of Republicans critical of your new approach. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, who might run for president, calls this the imperial presidency. And in the House, there is this thing, as you know, called the STOP Act. They want to rein in what you're trying to do. How do you respond to that?
Well, I don't think that's very serious. The truth of the matter is that every president engages in executive actions. In fact, we've been very disciplined and sparing in terms of the executive actions that we've taken. We make sure that we're doing it within the authority that we have under statute, but I'm not going to make an apology for saying that if I can help middle-class families and folks who are working hard to try to get in the middle class do a little bit better, then I'm going to do it. And I think it's a tough argument for the other side to make, that not only are they willing to not do anything, but they also want me not to do anything. In which case, I think the American people, whose right now estimation of Congress is already pretty low, might have an even lower opinion on it.
So I don't know if that's satisfying. I guess it probably depends on your partisan perspective as to whether you find that answer satisfying. But I also want to show President Obama explaining specifically the kind of executive action, not just executive order, but executive action that says he's going to take to try to deal with problems that Congress isn't dealing with. And this has to do with the problem of the long-term unemployed. People who've been unemployed for a long period of time, often they get weeded out of the application pool right at the beginning because people don't want to hire applicants who have these long gaps in their employment history. And so President Obama talked about what he's doing without getting any authorization from Congress, what he can do to try to combat that problem. And I'll show you that clip also in his discussion with Jake Tapper from CNN in this clip.
But as I said at the State of the Union, I can't wait. And the American people, more importantly, cannot wait. We know that one of the biggest problems right now in the jobs market is the long-term unemployed.
Yeah, they're having trouble. People won't hire them because they've been unemployed so long.
Because they've been unemployed so long, folks are looking at that gap in their resume and they're weeding them out before these folks even get a chance for an interview. So what we've done is to gather together 300 companies just to start with, including some of the top 50 companies in the country, companies like Walmart and Apple and Ford and others, to say, let's establish best practices. Do not screen people out of the hiring process just because they've been out of work for a long time. We just went through the worst recession since the Great Depression. All those things cumulatively are going to have an impact. Will we be able to have more of an impact if we can get Congress, for example, to pass a minimum wage law that applies to everybody as opposed to me just through executive order, making sure that folks who are contractors to the federal government have to pay a minimum wage? Absolutely. And that's why I'm going to keep on reaching out to them, but I'm not going to wait for them.
You're a critic.
So I actually think that is a pretty good answer, at least on that one very specific issue, that the president does have the power of the bully pulpit, as they say, to get people to change their view on these problems without having to get any authorization from Congress. So I did like that answer. One other place, and this is an answer from President Obama I didn't like so much. Jake Tapper also asked him about the James Clapper lying to Congress that I talked about last week on LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, and I actually showed the clip, and I'm about to show it again, that I showed back in the spring, right after the Edward Snowden leaks, about the extensive bulk phone record collection, where basically every phone call in the United States is not the contents of the phone call, but who was the phone number and the phone number called, the phone number that called it, and the two sides of the conversation, the length of the conversation and the locations. That's the metadata that actually is being stored. And a couple months before, in March of last year, James Clapper from the National Security Agency was asked by Ron Wyden, senator from Oregon, if the United States was collecting information on millions of Americans, and he basically lied to Congress about it. And first I'll show you, this is the clip from March 2013, before the Edward Snowden leaks, of Ron Wyden asking and James Clapper answering, and I'll show you that clip here.
Last summer, the NSA director was at a conference, and he was asked a question about the NSA surveillance of Americans. He replied, and I quote here, "The story that we have millions or hundreds of millions of dossiers on people is completely false." The reason I'm asking the question is, having served on the committee now for a dozen years, I don't really know what a dossier is in this context. So what I wanted to see is if you could give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
I love watching James Clapper like scratching his head there while he's being dishonest about what the NSA is doing. And so anyway, Jake Tapper asked President Obama about what James Clapper said there, and basically asked him to react to whether he still had, how the American people could have faith in him, even though President Obama does. Anyway, I'll show you the clip, and then I'll talk about it a little bit afterwards. Here.
Was not honest. He said later that it was the least untruthful answer he could give. I know that you have faith in Clapper. I know that you believe that these programs protect the American people. But I can't believe that you weren't disappointed by his answer, because least untruthful is not a phrase I remember hearing on the campaign trail.
I think that Jim Clapper himself would acknowledge, and has acknowledged, that he should have been more careful about how he responded. His concern was that he had a classified program that he couldn't talk about, and he was in an open hearing in which he was asked, he was prompted to disclose a program, and so he felt that he was caught between a rock and a hard place.
So you understand what he did?
Subsequently, I think he's acknowledged that he could have handled it better. He's spoken to Mr. Wyden personally. I think the broader point is that everybody that I've dealt with in our intelligence community is really working hard to try to do a very tough job, protect us when there are constant threat streams coming at us, but doing so in a way that's consistent with the law and consistent with our Constitution, consistent with our privacy rights. I am actually confident that we can continue to have the best intelligence service in the world, but win back the confidence of both the American people as well as folks overseas. But it's going to take some time. It's going to take some work, partly because the technology has just moved so quickly that the discussions that need to be had didn't happen fast enough, didn't happen on the front end. And I think that we have the opportunity now to move forward in a way that is going to make a difference.
A lot.
Now, I don't really think you can blame technology for why James Clapper told that untruth to Ron Wyden and to Congress there. I don't really like that answer very much, but anyway, I thought I would show it to you because I know NSA spying has been an issue that I've come back to again and again on my Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundups. Another issue I want to talk about that was covered on a couple different shows this morning is the marijuana legalization issue. Jake Tapper, also on CNN, got President Obama to expand on his remarks in a New Yorker interview. Was it New York Magazine or New Yorker? I can't remember. Neither New York or New Yorker Magazine, where he said that he thought that marijuana was no more dangerous or less dangerous than alcohol, and So, of course, Jake Tapper asked a really good follow-up question on that issue, if he really believes that marijuana is less dangerous than alcohol. And I'll show you the question and then President Obama's answer over in this clip.
Legalization of marijuana. You gave an interview to the New Yorker's David Remnick, and you said that you thought smoking pot was a bad habit, but you didn't think it was any worse for a person than drinking. Now, that contradicts the official Obama administration policy, both on the website of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, and also the fact that marijuana is considered a Schedule I narcotic along with heroin and ecstasy. Now, do you think you were maybe talking just a little too casually about it with Remnick and the New Yorker, or are you considering not making marijuana a Schedule I narcotic?
Well, first of all, what is and isn't a Schedule I narcotic is a job for Congress.
I think it's the DEA that decides that.
It's not something by ourselves that we start changing. No, there are laws undergirding those determinations.
Would you support that move?
But the broader point, I stand by my belief, based, I think, on the scientific evidence, that marijuana for casual users, individual users, is subject to abuse just like alcohol is, and should be treated as a public health problem and challenge. But as I said in the interview, my concern is when you end up having very heavy criminal penalties for individual users that have been applied unevenly and in some cases with a racial disparity. And I think that is a problem. Over the long term, what I believe is if we can deal with some of the criminal penalty issues, then we can really tackle what is a problem not just for marijuana, but also alcohol, also cigarettes, also harder drugs, and that is try to make sure that our kids don't get into these habits in the first place. And the incarceration model that we've taken, particularly around marijuana, does not seem to have produced the kinds of results that we've set. But I do offer a cautionary note, and I said this in the interview. Those who think legalization is a panacea, I think they have to ask themselves some tough questions too. Because if we start having a situation where big corporations with a lot of resources and distribution and marketing arms are suddenly going out there peddling marijuana, then the levels of abuse that may take place are going to be higher.
A quick note about who sets federal drug policy. The president can, in fact, downgrade marijuana from a Schedule I narcotic, but only Congress can pass a law to make it legal nationwide.
I love that fact check at the end from Candy Crowley, which she was backing up what Jake Tapper said in the interview. He tried to correct the president when the president said, "Oh, I can't downgrade Schedule I substances without the consent of Congress," but that actually is a administrative decision by the DEA. And it's kind of funny when he's talking about all these things he's going to do by executive order. There actually is an administration oversight. I seem to remember from the whole Plan B debacle, where the actual not the DEA in that case, it's the was it the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, approved Plan B for over-the-counter use for anybody, and the political branches came in and overruled that because they were afraid that that minors were going to get Plan B, even though Plan B is basically just birth control pills in a concentrated form or whatever. But anyway, I don't think that what President Obama said there was all that impressive. I'd like to see Democrats come out much more in favor of legalization, not getting rid of the harshest penalties. In fact, Republican governor of Louisiana, Bobby Jindal, was on CNN State of the Union later talking to Candy Crowley, and his position was pretty close to the position of President Obama, even though he's governor of one of the states with some of the harshest marijuana possession penalties, Louisiana. Anyway, I'll show you. And Candy Crowley pointed it out to him, and he agreed with President Obama and talked about some of the same lower penalties, but not legalization talk that I think just doesn't go far enough. And I'll show you that clip here.
Sure, Candy. We've started an initiative, not just last year, but since I've been governor, and last year we accelerated that, looking to lower those penalties. I agree with the president that we lock up too many people for casual drug use. What I mean by that is that certainly non-violent, non-repeat offenders, those that aren't committing other crimes, we should look at treatment and rehabilitation. I'm not for the legalization, the full legalization of marijuana as has been done in Colorado, but certainly I think that it makes sense. We could use our resources more effectively. We passed some pretty good laws last year. There's more work that we can do there. I do think when it comes to medical marijuana, I've said that I'm open if it's tightly regulated with legitimate medical purposes. I do think this, though, on the bigger issue, and so, yeah, I agree with the president. We don't need to be locking up people who aren't the dealers, who aren't committing other crimes, especially those who aren't committing other violent crimes. I think there are better uses of our dollars, and I think we can rehabilitate those folks. But I do think that given all the problems facing our country, there are other issues that are more important, especially when it comes to growing our economy. You know, the president gave his State of the Union, and you may remember Bill Clinton famously said in a previous State of the Union, the era of big government is over. Turns out that isn't true. You know, big government's alive and well and unfortunately strangling our economy. So certainly let's help folks get rehabilitated, get drug treatment, but let's also focus on the issues that the American people care more about, like growing our economy.
So, yeah, I don't think what Bobby Jindal said there is all that different from what President Obama said there. And so that's a little bit disappointing that the Democratic president can't go any farther on marijuana legalization than a Republican governor of Louisiana. I want to show you a few more clips on the marijuana issue. Because it's the Super Bowl and it's between the two teams from states that have legalized marijuana, Washington and Colorado. They actually had Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper was also over on this week with George Stephanopoulos, since they're all in New York for the big game, and he talked about how he opposed marijuana legalization, but how now that it's legal, he has to work on the implementation, and hopefully if the people rise up and legalize marijuana, people like Bobby Jindal and Barack Obama will have to do what Governor John Hickenlooper is talking about doing here, and I want to show you that clip here.
Well, I think that, again, anyone who opposed it, and there were a lot of good reasons to oppose it, we now have, I think, an obligation. The voters passed it 55-45 to make sure we do it properly. And I think that means that we make sure kids under the age of 21 don't get it. A lot of the top scientists think that you can lose long-term memory if you're taking this high THC marijuana. Have to make sure people aren't driving when they're high. You know, make sure that we regulate it like we do alcohol, right? That we have the resources necessary to keep it out of the hands of kids and keep our communities safe.
And Governor,
so yeah, I think hopefully politicians who now are talking like President Obama and Bobby Jindal in those last couple clips will start talking like John Hickenlooper if there are enough people to get marijuana legalized through state legislatures, and then I don't know, maybe it will end up being a good issue. And one of the pieces of evidence that marijuana legalization might actually do well, or might actually be a wave of the future, is some of the other guests that were over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, one of whom was this pediatrician, the chief health correspondent for ABC. I'm not sure I have his title exactly correct there, but he's a doctor, he's a pediatrician, Dr. Richard Besser, and he talked about how as he researched the issue, he actually became more pro-legalization, and I'll show you that clip here.
I'm a parent of two teenage boys. I'm a pediatrician, and I'm very concerned about the impact on the developing brain from frequent use. And so I went into the story thinking there's no way this should be legal. But the more I got into the story, the more I was convinced by the arguments around the comparison between alcohol and its dangers and marijuana. And it's just not rational that adults don't have the choice of using marijuana, but they do for alcohol. Marijuana is less likely to be addictive, it's less likely to cause car accidents and birth defects, it's less likely to cause domestic violence. So how do you rationally say that it's okay to drink alcohol with that profile, but it's not okay to occasionally use marijuana?
How do you do that?
So yeah, that was a pretty reasonable argument to see on corporate news television, so I was glad to see that. And I was also glad to see that ABC had on one of the officials at the ACLU of Washington to talk about marijuana legalization in Washington, and her name's Allison Holcomb, and she talked about why, some people talk about decriminalization instead of legalization, which is kind of like turning marijuana into a traffic ticket but still making it illegal. And there's a problem when it's still illegal that Allison Holcomb pointed out when she was asked about that by George Stephanopoulos and sort of their marijuana roundtable, and I want to show you that quick clip here.
I think the concern with stopping with decriminalization is that we do have to address the black market. If we don't address the black market, kids are going to keep getting marijuana that's 3 times as strong as THC. That's happening outside of any sort of regulatory structure. We need the regulations, we need licensing, we need standards.
So, I thought that was another good argument as to why legalization is better than decriminalization. So I wanted to show you that clip. And then before I leave the marijuana issue, I want to show you the marijuana editor for, is it the Denver Post? I think it was the Denver Post. Hopefully they'll flash it up on the screen before the end of his clip, where he was talking about how after marijuana legalization in Colorado, things actually smell different. I thought that was kind of a humorous clip, so I'll show you that from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos here.
You can. If you went back a couple years in the metro area and took a big whiff in downtown Denver, downtown Boulder, it would have been your average city. But now I think if you're at a Bronco game, if you're out in downtown Denver, you can actually smell the difference. We were at the Justin Timberlake concert just a few weeks ago, and you could definitely smell the difference there. And it's been ever present at concerts for decades.
What's the biggest challenge?
I thought that was kind of a silly clip. I don't know if Colorado actually smells different after legalization. But I don't know. I guess I haven't been to Colorado. So, and you saw he is actually the marijuana editor for the Denver Post. His name is Ricardo Baca. And so I want to show you that clip. That's the last of the marijuana clips. But I want to show a couple or a few quick clips on the immigration issue, which I've been covering on LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup for months and months. As you may recall, the Senate passed a comprehensive immigration reform in a bipartisan way with, I think it was like 69 or 70 votes in the Senate, which means they had like 15 or so Republican votes. And it had like huge amounts of border security and a pathway to citizenship after like 10 or 12 or 13 years and paying all these fines and back taxes. And so it has heavy border security and an arduous pathway to citizenship, but it does have that pathway to citizenship. And as I was saying last week on this issue, the Republican proposals have, for at least for adults, not kids who were brought here without their knowledge, what they're called the dreamers. The kids are going to be legalized or get a pathway to citizenship under the Republican plan, but adults are just going to get legal status, not necessarily a pathway to citizenship. And what I was saying last week is the problem with that is then you create this whole like second-class citizenship of people who live in the country, work in the country, pay taxes, but they don't get to vote and they don't have political power. And there are other countries like that. They're especially like Arab countries. I remember Kuwait has a whole bunch of like guest workers where like 40% of the population were like Palestinians before the invasion of Kuwait. And there are other like Indians and Bangladeshis. And so they have these like non-citizens who make up a huge part of the population and don't have all the rights that citizens have. And that's a problem. And I'm glad to see the Obama administration is sort of drawing a line saying they don't want second-class citizenship, but then they're kind of contradicting themselves, saying they're willing to listen to this Republican proposal. And I'm not sure what to make of that, but I'll show you. First, here's Dennis McDonough over, I believe this is from Meet the Press, talking about this whole what the Republicans are proposing and the second-class citizenship issue over in this clip.
Could the president live with that?
President's principles on immigration have been out there now for some time. The bottom line here is he does not want to see an America where we have two permanent classes. That is to say, citizens and non-citizens as we proceed. That's his principle. Nevertheless, the principles that were laid out by the Republican leadership towards the end of last week, we think that's a pretty good step, pretty good progress in this debate coming from where they were to where they are now. Our job is to step back, let this debate happen in the House, and we'll obviously continue to press for our principles. The House Democrats will as well, and we feel pretty good that we'll get a bill done this year.
You assume.
Yeah, so yeah, like what I was saying, what Dennis McDonough, the White House Chief of Staff, said there doesn't really make sense, because he's saying he doesn't want second-class citizenship, but he kind of likes what the Republicans are doing, which is creating this legal status for adults amongst the 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States, but not a pathway to citizenship, or at least not much that, I mean, not that they've really defined. And I'll show you, President Obama was actually asked about that in his interview with Jake Tapper over on State of the Union, and he didn't really clear it up that much, but anyway, I'll show you that clip here.
I just wonder if you see this at all in terms of especially the pathway to citizenship, in the way that you seem to when you were passing healthcare reform and I was covering it, the public option. In other words, it would be great in your view if you could do it. It's not going to happen, and there might be some expectation setting you have to do, because having reported on this, I don't think House Republicans can pass anything that has a pathway to citizenship.
Well, here's the good news, though. Number one, there is a desire to get it done. And that, particularly in this Congress, is a huge piece of business, because they haven't gotten a lot done over the last couple of years out of the House Republican caucus. They've been willing to say what they're against, not so much what they're for. The fact that they're for something, I think, is progress. I do know that for a lot of families, the fear of deportation is one of the biggest concerns that they've got. And that's why we took executive actions, given my prosecutorial discretion, to make sure we're not deporting kids who grew up here and are Americans for all practical purposes. But we need to get that codified. And the question is there more that we can do in this legislation that gets both Democratic and Republican support, but solves these broader problems, including strengthening borders and making sure that we have a legal immigration system that works better than it currently does.
So yeah, President Obama in his answer there didn't really clear things up very much as to how he's going to both stop this second-class citizenship but accept the Republicans. But if you really want to see someone try to dodge the issue, I want to show you Representative Eric Cantor, Republican Majority Leader of the House, was over on Face the Nation, where substituting for Bob Schieffer this week was Major Garrett, who some of you may remember as a Fox News reporter. Now he's over on CBS. And he did the best he could trying to get Eric Cantor to explain whether there was any possibility of citizenship in this legal status that Republicans are proposing in their new principles they just came up with. And as you can see, he asked 3 times, and Eric Cantor kept changing the subject, doing all sorts of dodging, but never really answered the question. And this is kind of a long clip, but I want to show all 3 dodges by Republican Eric Cantor here.
First, the principles enumerate a legal status for the 11 to 12 million illegal immigrants here in this country now. What do you mean by that, and does that by definition mean no citizenship for them ever?
Well, Major, let me tell you something. I mean, there's a lot of focus on the immigration issue, but, you know, in reality, we not only want to help the situation there, a lot of the discussion that we had with our members at the retreat was that we want to help the problems right now of job growth and the lack of the job growth. We know that 75% of Americans are living from paycheck to paycheck. We've come up with some real solutions to help America work for those people, too. And so I believe that you're going to see us in Congress not only continue this discussion on immigration, but we want to try and get to the heart of the issues that are affecting most Americans.
But Mr. Leader, you know as well as I do, this is a central dividing line issue, definitionally and optically, for many in your constituency. Not only members who have votes, but the voters who sent them here. Legal status, yes. citizenship never or possibly?
Listen, where I think we ought to start, again, this is an issue among many that, in fact, most of the country is focusing on the question of the squeeze of the working middle class, the way the president spoke about in the State of the Union, the lack of opportunity that so many people are experiencing now. We want to try and deal with that as well. But as far as immigration is concerned, we've said all along we don't believe in a comprehensive fix. We want to go in a step-by-step approach to trying to address the problems. Yes, there's a problem on the border and implementation of the laws. I've always said we ought to be dealing with the things that we can agree on, which are the kids. Most people say this country has never held kids liable for the misdeeds of their parents. And I think that in many instances, kids have been brought here, in some, unbeknownst to themselves, and brought here illegally, but yet they know no other place is home. Certainly we ought to take care of that problem. That should come first, because it just makes sense to start where we can find agreement.
But you know as well as I do, to get this all put together, the president said this week that there has to be some meeting of the minds for all, not just the dreamers, the so-called kids that you just referred to. And twice now you've avoided the opportunity to say what the principles that were handed out to your members said here on camera. Are you running away from this even at the start? The idea that there will be a legal status and possibly a path to citizenship. Can you just define that for me?
I'm really not running away from this. I know this is something that a lot of people want to report on and talk about, but most of the American people are worried about what's going on in their households, the fact that wages have not gone up in this country in 10 years, and yes, we're going to continue the discussion on immigration. We have said yes. We came out of there saying, you know, there's some principles, these standards that were being released are draft standards. We had a very positive discussion, and as I said before, some things that have got to happen, which is the president has got to demonstrate, frankly, the country and the Congress can trust him in implementing the laws. Look what he's done with Obamacare. He has selectively enforced that law, and some have raised constitutional questions whether he can even do some things like that. So there's a real question of trust here, and you know, the White House continues to really thumb its nose up, if you will, at the Congress. The president in his State of the Union address did it flat out. He said, when Congress doesn't work with me, I'll just go do it myself. And again, that's part of the problem in this town and why there's been such a difficult time in getting things done.
Now, I think the real reason that there's a problem getting things done is there's this split in the Republican Party, and there are some people on the extreme right who anything that, you know, what Representative Cantor there wouldn't agree to, even endorse, was the principles. And I haven't put the link down, but I'll put a link, if you're watching this as a recorded show, I'll put a link down there to the principles that came out of this Republican retreat, where they said there'd be no special path to citizenship, but that seems to mean that these people could eventually become citizens if they get their green cards and then go through the regular process that anyone else who gets a green card. So it wouldn't be a special path to citizenship, but they might actually become citizens someday. But Eric Cantor wouldn't even say that, because I guess he doesn't want to get on the bad side of anyone in the Republican Party. And there are some people who are real extreme, and I'm leaving the immigration issue. I want to show one more clip from Saturday Night Live. This is the other Weekend Update anchor, Cecily Strong, talked about how Republican Senator from Arizona, John McCain, who ran against Obama back in 2008, he actually got censured by his own party for being too liberal, believe it or not. And I kind of enjoyed the joke they made about it. Here's Cecily Strong over talking about the censure, and here's the joke she made about it in this clip.
The Arizona Republican Party this week formally censured Senator John McCain, saying that his voting record is too liberal. Said McCain, "Oh, I've been through much worse." Oh, no, not that. Yeah, there it is.
So I just wanted to show that quick clip there from Saturday Night Live, as long as we were talking about the fractures in the Republican Party there for a moment. But speaking of problems in the Republican Party, I also wanted to do a few clips on Bridgegate. You know, I did like almost a whole show on Republican Governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie's problems with the scandal that some people on his staff, at least, authorized the closing of lanes on the George Washington Bridge, supposedly as political payback for some Democrat who wouldn't endorse Chris Christie, the mayor of Fort Lee, New Jersey, and there are all sorts of like new things coming out. And there was actually one of the breaking news over the last few days was David Wildstein, is that his name? One of the guys, the former confidants of Chris Christie, who Chris Christie threw under the bus, the guy who worked for him at the Port Authority, who he actually like appointed to this position to be his eyes and ears at the Port Authority, has now, his lawyer, first he took the Fifth Amendment and wouldn't say if he'd done anything wrong when called to testify, and then now his lawyer has made this proffer to the Port Authority saying why the Port Authority should pay his legal fees, and said that there is evidence exists that shows that Chris Christie knew about this before he is admitting in his press conference to knowing about it. And first I'm going to show you a quick clip. This is from Meet the Press, where they had a report from Kelly O'Donnell. One of the reporters talked about some of these latest developments. So I'm going to show like a little the breaking news, and at least from the last couple days, from Meet the Press in this clip.
Question is the use of the word.
Late Saturday, NBC News obtained a Christie office memo being sent to the governor's supporters that aggressively pushes back against both the New York Times, which first reported the allegations made by former Port Authority official David Wildstein, and then takes on Wildstein's personal character, concluding that, quote, David Wildstein will do and say anything to save David Wildstein. A former Christie ally, Wildstein, who supervised the lane closures last fall and then took the Fifth in January,
I respectfully assert my right to remain silent.
Dangled hints that Christie may know more about the bridge traffic scandal.
I had no knowledge or involvement in this issue, in its planning or its execution.
Wildstein's attorney wrote, evidence exists tying Mr. Christie to having knowledge of the lane closures during the period when the lanes were closed, contrary to what the governor stated publicly.
Would you reconsider the decision to...
Wildstein's central role in the scandal makes his claims intriguing, but he offers no specific evidence.
Well, David Wildstein claims that evidence exists, but what's left unanswered is what kind of evidence, who has that evidence, and does it say anything about whether Christie knew the motivation behind these lane closures?
So yeah, there's a brief report from Kelly O'Donnell and Meet the Press, and then one of the newsmakers on this issue, who I've shown in the past, and I've never been able to pronounce his name correctly, but I've got it this week. He's Assembly Person John Wisniewski, and I remembered it because the middle syllable always gives me trouble, and it's Ness, like Elliot Ness, because he's one of the legislators investigating wrongdoing, so that's how I'm remembering it. And he appeared both on Meet the Press and then on Face the Nation. First on Meet the Press, he talked about David Wildstein's strange phrasing, or his lawyer's strange phrasing of what he knew, that evidence exists. And so here's Assemblyman John Wisniewski from New Jersey talking about this breaking new evidence supposedly against Chris Christie in this clip.
The question is the use of the words evidence exists, as opposed to saying I have documents or I have an email. It's a curious choice of words, which maybe he knows somebody else that has information. Maybe this is a conversation he had. Maybe this is something else that is not within the scope of the subpoena the committee issued. So it raises questions about what does he have and why doesn't the committee have it?
Do you? So yeah, it raises questions. And you know, when this story first broke a day or two ago, it sounded like that Chris Christie's options had moved from will he be running for president in 2016 to will he be continuing as governor of New Jersey for the rest of his term, and things were looking bad for him. But there are a lot of questions. I mean, I don't know if the other shoe is going to drop. I think that there's a good possibility it will, but all I'm saying is it hasn't quite dropped yet, and there's stuff that's coming up, though, and I want to show one more clip from Assemblyman John Wisniewski of New Jersey, this time over on Face the Nation, talking to Major Garrett talking about what's coming up in his investigation here.
Well, I'd like to see the material that Mr. Wildstein's attorney talked about. We need to get all of the subpoena documents that we're supposed to start receiving tomorrow and start answering some of the questions that are out there. Why did Bridget Kelly send this email that closed the lanes? Who gave her the authority to send that email? What made her believe it was okay? There's a lot of unanswered questions that will then determine the next step the committee takes.
So I guess that's sort of a stay tuned message, and that's kind of interesting. The whole Bridgegate scandal is ongoing, and so I think we'll be seeing more about that on LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup in the future. I have a few more quick clips I want to show you that are not really on any of these topics, more on sort of a media bias, and also especially Fox News bias. I'm going to show you one more clip from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. Stephen Merchant was on, he's a British comedian. I think he was involved in the creation of The Office. I know him in my house. My daughter's a big fan of the Portal game, and he does the voice of Wheatley on Portal and Portal 2, the artificial intelligence, like, I don't know if the narrator or somehow involved in that game. I've never played the game, but so I'm going to show you one more clip from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. Hopefully it won't shut down the stream. I got this weird warning from YouTube that I'm showing like content ID related clips, and so I don't know if it was from the Real Time with Bill Maher clips I showed before, because I've shrunk down all the NBC ones. So I don't know if the show suddenly stops in the middle of this clip, you know why. But I'm going to show you a clip of Stephen Merchant on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, talking about the problems he has finding unbiased media now that he's living in the United States. And I thought it was definitely worth discussing in a fair use, as a fair use exception to copyright law. I will give you additional commentary, hopefully, after I show the clip here.
Stuff is different.
I think I never quite know where to go to in America for my news sources. I watch this show, but obviously you're a deeply biased man, and that's not a fair representation. I'll be watching Ronan Shaw. I assume that's going to be biased. I don't. Fox News is obviously. I think centrist.
Come on, please.
I think Fox News is presumably a spoof, like that. At some point, but at some point. Yeah. At some point, you're going to be watching, and Sean Hannity's going to be going, Muslims are trying to make us all gay. Sorry, I can't do this anymore. Sorry, we were joking. It was a joke. Sorry, I'm sorry, I ruined it. It's just, you can't, the guys from South Park will come out and go, it was us all along. It doesn't, I don't know, at least in England we have, the BBC, and for all of its flaws, the BBC does remain as impartial as I think is possible. And I find even when I'm here, going back to the BBC for my news coverage, because I feel like I trust them, or I don't know who to trust here. And also there's just there's a cacophony of noise.
And it's just...
So yeah, I thought that was a great way of describing Fox News from a British outsider's point of view. And I've always enjoyed the BBC, and the few times that I've watched it, there were times when I was abroad for the summer where BBC was my main news source for a few months at a time. BBC Radio, I haven't watched BBC television, but generally I have been impressed with the quality of news I've heard on BBC, and I now have a bunch of British viewers. I guess you can give me your comments on what you think about BBC, but that wasn't the only Fox News bias clip I want to show you. I also want to show you a quick clip from Bill O'Reilly's interview of President Obama right in the Super Bowl pregame show. I don't know, hopefully this won't get me knocked off the air for content ID violation, because I know that those programs can also be heavily copyrighted. But anyway, Bill O'Reilly, you can see the whole interview that Bill O'Reilly did with President Obama, and it was a live interview like an hour or two before the Super Bowl started, and it's up on YouTube. I put a link down in the video description down that you can click on, and it's like almost 10 minutes long. And this is going to be a quick clip. Bill O'Reilly, he did all like the right-wing talking points, all the Fox News phony scandals. He talked about the Obamacare website and why haven't you fired Kathleen Sebelius. He talked about Benghazi, of course, and then he did the IRS scandal, and I really like President Obama's response at the end, at the tail end of all those stories, and as to why those scandals were in the news in the first place. And I'm going to show you that clip here.
What some people are saying is that the IRS was used at a local level in Cincinnati, maybe other places, to go after.
Absolutely wrong.
But how do you
Absolutely
know
wrong.
that? Because we still don't know what happened there.
Bill, we do. That's not what happened. Folks have, again, had multiple hearings on this. I mean, these kinds of things keep on surfacing, in part because you and your TV station will promote them. But when
don't
folks
you feel
actually,
there are unanswered questions?
Bill, when you actually look at the stuff, there have been multiple hearings on it. What happened here is that you've got a 501c4 law that people think is confusing, that the folks did not know how to implement. Because it basically says,
so you're saying
if you were
no
involved,
corruption there at all? No.
That's not what I'm
Flat.
saying. That's actually
No, but I want to know what you're saying. You're the leader of the country.
Absolutely.
You're saying no corruption?
No.
None?
No. There were some boneheaded decisions out of a
but
local
no mass
office.
corruption?
Not even mass corruption, not even a smidgen of corruption, I would say.
I really like that part where President Obama says that the reason these stories are scandals is because of Fox News, because I like to see a little breath of reality brought into Bill O'Reilly's world every now and then. Not that I'm a fan of everything President Obama does, but I did like that particular clip. And speaking of weird Fox News coverage, I watched Fox News Sunday this morning, and one of the weird things about it was they didn't cover any political news at all. You know, Fox News has got the Super Bowl this year, and so Fox News Sunday, their Sunday morning political talk show, was devoted entirely to talking about football. And I don't know, that seems not really journalistic to me, but here I'm going to show you. This is the clip right at the beginning of Fox News Sunday where they talk about what they're going to talk about during the show, and you can see there's nothing political at all from the intro here.
I'm Chris Wallace, reporting from MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey, where America's biggest sports stage is set for Super Bowl 48. The Denver Broncos and Seattle Seahawks face off tonight. But first, the state of America's game, from player safety to going international. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell joins us for an exclusive interview. Then, two of the most revered names in football, Elway and Manning. We'll talk with famed quarterback turned Broncos executive John Elway about the role he played in bringing Peyton Manning to Denver, and the NFL's most famous dad.
If Peyton and the Broncos do win on Sunday, is there a part of you that would like to see him retire, would like to see him quit on top?
Yeah, a little bit. We'll ask Archie Manning about his son's amazing recovery from 4 neck surgeries. Plus, the Fox NFL Sunday Gang stops by, and our Power Player of the Week, 3-time Super Bowl champ Troy Aikman, on making the turn from player to broadcaster.
I love what I do right now in broadcasting. It's the next best thing to playing the game.
All right now on Fox News Sunday.
So yeah, that was all the topics they talked about on Fox News Sunday. Now, all of the Sunday morning news shows talked about the Super Bowl, and they had like extended segments on like the concussion settlement that the NFL made, the $750 million settlement, or $760 million settlement that got rejected by the judge. And I almost showed you this clip of David Gregory asking a question about that and revealing that his wife actually worked for the NFL and worked out that settlement. And then he asked this question that was kind of something his wife may have said to him. I don't know, but at least he revealed it. But yeah, so all the Sunday morning news shows talked about the Super Bowl to some extent, but Fox News Sunday was the only program that decided no coverage of President Obama's State of the Union, no coverage of the breaking story in Chris Christie's Bridgegate scandal, nothing having to do with this change, the Republican retreat and their principles on immigration. None of that on Fox News Sunday. Fox News Sunday was 100% football. In fact, there was only one question that even was slightly political. And it was, I guess, Chris Wallace had to. He talked about how John Elway was this big football hero, and so of course he had to reveal this big football hero was a Republican. And the one political question I saw on Fox News Sunday this morning here.
This being Fox News Sunday, I have to ask a political question. In the course of researching this interview, I found out, which I didn't know, that you're a big Republican, and in fact you contributed a lot of money in 2012 to Mitt Romney. Why do you support the GOP?
Well, I mean, those are what my beliefs are. I believe that, you know, as a country that, you know, we're given the opportunity to succeed or not succeed. And I think that, you know, for us to be able to, I don't believe in safety nets. Obviously, we got to have some kind of safety nets, but I think that my philosophy is when you're given the opportunity to go take advantage of that. And I think that that's when you get the best out of people. And so my beliefs align best with the GOP. I wouldn't say I'm way right. You know, I'm middle right. I you know, been fortunate to be in business, and I'm one of those that believe that, you know what, you got to give a little to get some. And so I'd like to see us be able to free up Congress a little bit and say, okay, we need to give up a little bit to give a little bit. And if we were able to do that, and we acted more like businessmen in that situation, I believe that we'd be getting a lot more done.
So yeah, there you can see the one political question from Fox News Sunday. Was to John Elway, revealing why he's a Republican. At least he's not one of the more radical Republicans. I guess he was like trying to say, I'm not a shut the government down Republican, but still a Republican. And so those are all the clips I picked out for you from the Sunday morning shows and from the quasi-news shows that looks like YouTube let me broadcast all the clips for you. I hope you enjoyed them. I'm going to go look in the comment section real quick here and see if I can see any on-topic comments that people made that get a little live discussion going. Looks like there are a couple hundred comments, and let me see if I can scroll back to the beginning. And Keith H. says Obama's agenda is conservative because he has a very uncooperative Congress. Well, that's definitely true. And I think that's also why he's having to resort to these executive orders. JRM102 says Congress isn't doing it. So yeah, that's basically what I was just saying. Keep scrolling up. Joshua Don says LV loves this clip. I think he's talking about hopefully it's the James Clapper clip. Oh, and Martin Ullmankoff says, world's worst liar. Yeah, as I pointed out, that James Clapper clip where he like rubs his head when he's lying. I'd love to play poker with that guy because that's like the worst tell I've ever seen. I don't know. It's like, who was watching that? And we should have known, you know, I'm not a big believer in these, you can tell people are lying by looking at them and by, you know, but that seemed pretty extreme. So yeah, I do love that clip, and I hope you enjoyed the James Clapper clip every time I play it. I see people are talking about the final score of the Super Bowl. I didn't even really talk about the Super Bowl. I'm not a big football fan. I didn't watch the Super Bowl. I watched the pregame show to get that clip of Bill O'Reilly interviewing Barack Obama. But I'm not much of a sports fan at all. I used to be kind of a NBA basketball fan and kind of a Los Angeles Lakers fan when I was younger. I used to go to games in person. I lived in Los Angeles during like the times of Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but other than that, not much of a sports fan or a football fan or a Super Bowl fan. But let's see. A whole bunch of marijuana. Jeff Brassfield says pot is good for you. Well, I wouldn't go that far, but and they're talking about Amaze Satsuma talks about the pot bowl and gives the score of the game. I'm not going to give the score of the game in case people, it's a spoiler, right? And I suppose people might have recorded it, but whatever. Eve Larian says LV looks stoned. No, I've been kind of sick and I have kind of a cough and I'm a little dried out, but I don't think let me see. Look here, do I actually look stoned? No. And I also have these bright lights that are kind of shining in my eyes, so I don't know. But sorry, I don't really think that is accurate. But and Scumdog says no. I think LV likes wine. No wine either. But I'm just doing the best I can. Oh, alcohol is a gateway drug. Pot is a gateway to the fridge. Scumdog1 says, and I just made a video about on January 11th about marijuana versus alcohol, by the way, which has been pretty popular. Just in the last week, it's gotten like another 20,000 views. So you might want to check that out. I've been trying to make a lot more edited, produced videos for you all. Anyway, the show's like well over an hour now. Let me see. Oh, Amaze Satsuma also said about the executive order question. Every time some idiot says Obama is lawless president, when interview or next question should be, so when do you begin impeachment proceedings? And that actually was a question that Major Garrett asked. I think it was Major Garrett asked Eric Cantor, but I didn't show that clip. But yeah, the whole impeachment issue did come up, but I just didn't show that clip. Anyway, like I said, it's been I've got almost 100 viewers. I'm well over an hour now. I'm glad to see so many people posting comments. I hope you enjoyed the show. I do need to get on with a couple things for the evening, as I'm sure many of you do. I hope you'll keep joining me on Sunday evening, 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, when I show you my clips that I've chosen from the corporate media and from the quasi-news shows. No Saturday Night Live clips till March, and no more Seth Meyers, but hopefully I'll get you some other good comedy clips to mix in and talk about in a fair use manner for the future, and YouTube won't be cutting me off or giving me content ID problems. I don't know where that came from. And look for more edited, produced videos. I'm trying to increase my production, so look for that on my channel. And for my viewers in the United States, enjoy the rest of your weekend. And for my viewers in Europe and around the world, enjoy the beginning of your week. I hope I made your week start in a little bit more informed manner, and keep joining me, and I'll keep doing that as best I can. See you around the internet.